Hello, good morning, good evening, Tom. So great to have you join me. Welcome.
Thank you very much. No, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Our coffee and chat. Okay, first of all, let's just do a quick intro, but then I have an immediate question about a coffee chat that I think somebody else might have a similar program. But tell us first who you are and what you do, and then we'll get to that.
Of course, we will get to that. So I am Tom Dunlop, as my name was saying there. I am the founder and CEO at a software company called Summize. So I guess you'd class us as a typical kind of CLM, contract technology. I like to think of us as just, I guess, technology that helps with every interaction with a contract, wherever that might be. So that's typically how we portray ourselves. But and I guess relevant background, a lawyer for a number of years prior to that. So I was an in-house lawyer for tech businesses for numerous years before founding Summize about 6.5, 7 years ago.
Okay, so you're about 6.5 years old. Okay, well, we'll talk about that in a second. But first of all, very importantly, so I also, of course, I'm an attorney, and let's make sure I'm understanding all of our IP risks and challenges we have. Do you have a coffee and contracts thing too?
Oh, gee, yes. You said that, and I was like not really catching on, thinking, yeah, I don't. Then I was like, yes, we actually do. Wasn't my idea. Maybe it's called coffee and contracts, and it's not contracts and coffee. Maybe we've mixed it up a little bit.
I don't know if I change mine every other day. I honestly don't always remember what I am either. But okay, we're going to chalk this up to great minds think alike, and may our two programs get so popular that you and I end up in an IP international battle over the rights to contracts and coffee, or contracts and coffee and contracts, or whatever it is, because clearly this is a critical issue for me. So anyway,
absolutely,
great minds think alike. So you introduced Summize, as you said, software company that handles contracting. Interesting, because of course I know a thing or two about CLM technologies, and you didn't use that for. You didn't say we're a CLM tech company. So tell me, how do you describe your company? What does Summize do?
Yeah, I mean, the only reason I say we're not, I think maybe a year or two ago, I mean, you're fully aware of it. There's kind of this, like, there's so many new, I guess, ways to describe different products in this space that everyone's kind of using. I think for me, we've always been just razor focused on helping people be more efficient with contracts and helping people understand sign contracts. I think the key thing about why I kind of reference about every interaction is we are holistic. We cover anything from the initial draft through to storage in the repository and going forward. So we're very much a kind of end-to-end solution. We're there for every interaction with the contract. We also deliberately have built ours very differently. So we kind of embed our tool within the tools that people use every day. So we started a number of years ago with things like Slack and Teams chatbots and Outlook and Gmail assistants, and obviously Microsoft Word add-in, which isn't so unique anymore. It was back then, and a number of other areas where we integrate into those tools that people use.
And good for you on the Word plugin. And I know it's like you said, it's not so unique anymore. But I used to be shocked at how many let's call it just contracting automation providers kind of ignore that. Well, when the lawyers will come to our system, the lawyers will be like, they won't. So let's just. And I don't want to rain on parades, but I've been around this long enough, and they won't. Number one. Number two, then I would love, my favorite second one was always, and then they'll use, our editor is like Word, our editor. What? No, out, done. Like, that's just, and I couldn't say it, and people didn't listen. It was just like, well, no, but our tool, I'm like, unless you are building like the iPhone for contracting, that's going to move us from button phones or rotary dial phones to a clear crystal, box that I'm going to press and telephonically communicate or cellularly with the world. Please do not tell me that you're going to train lawyers to use an editor in some system. So yes, I thank you. And it's not just because I'm a Microsoft alum, but lawyers are going to live in Word for quite some time. Actually, yesterday, I love your thoughts on this because you mentioned also G Suite, and certainly from a male perspective, I get it. I'd love your honest thoughts on Google Docs versus Word for contracting. I have a very strong opinion on it, but I'd love to hear what you're seeing. What are you seeing in your customers and your prospects?
Well, so I think The other thing to elaborate on what you just said about Microsoft is true of so much of the tech stack. So when we started out trying to solve the whole like end-to-end contract lifecycle, and we're thinking about every interaction, it was a lot about like who's interacting with it, which stakeholder in the business is likely to want to, I guess, interact with the contract at that point. And then from that, what tool will they most likely want to use to do that interaction? Because Word is one part of it, which the lawyer's in. And then, I mentioned Slack, Teams, or Outlook, or Gmail, or Salesforce, HubSpot. All these different tools are likely to be a tool that someone else might want to stay in. So I think that's true across the board. And because contracts are pretty unique things that they do touch pretty much every department internally, they also go externally to third parties, external counsel, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Which is very unique. Not many like SaaS solutions have to cater for that many different people interacting with essentially one document. So I guess that's an ethos I believe in fully across the board and how we've designed the products. But to come back to your point on G-Docs versus Microsoft Word, like there is probably an acceptance of some of our clients that if you want the wider business to interact with the contracts, then they want to use G-Docs. The lawyer might not want to do the markup, and ultimately you export to it to do your markup. But if you do want them to interact with you and meet them where they are, then a lot of our clients may have Microsoft licenses and they prefer to do markups, but if they want engagement from the wider business and it's a collaboration of some description, then they may prefer to use a G-Doc. So it's, I'm, for many reasons that you will no doubt probably share, like a big Microsoft fan. And we like to think of ourselves as almost the power of G-Docs without adding that you can have your internal collaboration at the same time as kind of having the trust and confidence that the version of what you're working on is the version, and not with multiple people editing it. So I'm all Microsoft, but we do take the view that if other people want to interact with the G-Doc, then almost you don't.
No, absolutely. And I think you hit it spot on, right? It's interacting with the business, especially it's the younger companies too, I will say. So I spent a little bit of time in-house at Snowflake, and that was to me a shocking experience coming from Microsoft to Snowflake. And it was all Google Shop, everything Google. But of course, the lawyers were still like, yeah, I love Google. I'm like, sure you do. I mean, okay, but, and like, yeah, but I always have to then convert it to Word. I'm like, yeah, you do. So it's just it's a fact. So I think people just need to accept it and not try to change it that quickly. I feel like we're going through enough change to try to push our profession so much, so fast that some things I'm like, can you just let us have our track changes so we can sleep well at night? Because with Google Docs, I don't know, it always just did something weird. Every time I'd open, I'm like, wait, who touched it? What happened? It never feels like static. And I think that was, anyway.
Yeah, and it has to be for exactly the reason you described, because you have to go external, you have to share it with the other side. Like, we're not at the stage yet where I think lawyers feel comfortable all being in one place, negotiating simultaneously, collaborating on the same doc at the same time. It's
that's right.
So it has to be a moment in time where it's static.
Absolutely. That's the other big aha that I had, dealing with so many different providers where they're like, and then you send this to the third party through our tool. I'm like, nope. Because I remember when I was in-house and somebody would send me a link to something. This was back in the day before tech was super cool, but their little dinosaur would come knocking on my cave and say, hey, come to my cave and review the tablet there. And I was like, no.
Yeah.
I got my own tablet, I have my own cave. You send it to me how I like it, which is email attachment in Word, and I will get back to you. Especially, once you're outside of your own enterprise. So I do think we have a long way to go in there. But let's shift gears for a second. So you mentioned, Summize about 6.5, 7 years old. Before that, you were an attorney. I always love to hear the journeys and the stories of what made you leave and start this, and then just entrepreneurship, compared to being an in-house lawyer. So what made you take the big leap?
I'd say for one thing, it wasn't necessary. I don't feel like it was a big leap at the time. I think it was a more of a several steps really. But at the time I worked in a software company. That was important because I guess as an environment in a fast growth entrepreneurial environment, you do get the bug and you do hear almost everyone, even in, I was working very close with the finance teams. They had ideas every day. We had a black book of ideas that we'd share about businesses we could start. Like it was conducive of producing a lot of, you know, entrepreneurial thinking at least. And there's no surprise that if you look at, like, I mean, this is Silicon Valley really, where people who've been in those environments, the amount of companies that get created from, I guess, alumni from those companies then is what really spurs that community in a particular area. It kind of, it feeds new entrepreneurs. And I kind of got the bug. So I was surrounded by this highly entrepreneurial environment. I looked at myself as the lawyer thinking, I'm so far behind. Like, look at all these other teams innovating. Look at all the tools they've got. Look at how they make their day. And always thinking, surely I can do this better. And there's me printing out a Word document with a highlighter and tabs, and almost embarrassed to get them out on a paperless kind of company. So the actual initial trigger was we got bought basically as a software company. So I was doing exactly that on a desk, trying to basically review 500 contracts, 500 due diligence, and manually doing it. And obviously at the time there was no real like solution for being able to do this like across multiple contracts, but also very unstructured contracts, and that was the key. We used a lot of third-party paper in the company I was at, and it was so trying to get a consistent, I guess, extraction summary across, you know, thousands of contracts was very hard to do. So I had a colleague, there was a software engineer, my co-founder, and basically said, like, look, I'm losing the will to live with like manually reviewing these 500 contracts as well as my day job. Like, surely there's a way to automate it. And that's what spurred the initial version of Summize, which was, and why we're called Summize, was how can we create a summary of a contract really quickly? Obviously pre-Gen AI, and we started off with, I guess, a way, the big kind of, I guess, product side of it was more about finding relevance in contracts, almost like heat mapping contracts, to find everything and curating the data into very relevant bits of information per clause. And that was very much the, which has actually proved really valuable for when the LLMs came along, to kind of feed into those LLMs. So that's how we created, or how we started. And then I think the journey for us for a product was, you know, even though it was a big use case for me, and I thought everyone's going to want this product, it was great. Like, people did, but very much on a project basis. And I think at the time I was very much like cognizant that if we were going to be a software company, like, I needed to get this to be day-to-day use, not just, oh, I'll use it for a one-off and then I don't need to use the product again. So we just naturally started to expand functionality to be more holistic, and that's what made us to go pre-signature with a word adding a number of years ago before it was cool. And then we did the chatbots because we realized that, you know, again, where should we create a contract? Well, actually, like, the wider business has the commercial information. Like, a lot of time I'd go to the wider business and ask them so many pieces of information to draft a contract, let them do it themselves using Teams, Slack, Gmail, Outlook, whatever it might be. And that's really been the kind of, I guess, the founding story those years ago, and what made me think, yes, this is a problem. I'd love to give it a go. Worst case scenario, I'd go and be a lawyer again, like, and took the leap. So
I love that. I go to sleep with that still a little bit every night, to be honest. I mean, I'm still, every once in a while, I'm still like, what have I done? Okay, that's okay. I can always go be a lawyer. I can always go be a lawyer. I think I probably, I'm probably past that point. but in my head, it's always nice. It's always comforting.
Always
well, nice, you've mentioned, you know, I always like to see how long it takes for somebody to say AI in our conversations. Sometimes I break my own rule, which is fair because I made the rules of the game. But the game is, how long do we go? And I say, well, it looks like we got about 12 minutes in, and you mentioned Gen AI. So Summize is not an old company, but it was still born kind of pre the AI explosion. We know AI has been around forever, but not forever. It's been around for a while, but certainly this explosion in the last, 2.5-ish years, or maybe it's not an explosion as much as it's a kind of this democratization, this thrust into the common user's hands. And obviously, you know, the tail wags that dog where, whoa, it's everywhere. You know, if my 70-plus-year-old parents are talking about it at dinner, the latest CLM tech better have it. So it almost feels like we're seeing that push where it's an outside in push, it's an inside out push everywhere. Tell us a little bit about how do you embrace it? What happened? Like, what happened? Did your company go, oh my God, this thing's happening? And you know, what was your approach to it?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing was, I mean, it's really powerful for us instantly because we did, you know, we're called Summize, right? Our expertise was we summarize signed contracts. So ironically, the bit we struggled with was we were able to find everything that's relevant in a contract really quickly and almost rank it and get this really curated data. It's really powerful. But I guess what our problem was, how do we create a really natural language output that says what those snippets of information say? That was what we struggled with to actually present back to the user, because that was the whole point. But so when the first models came about, even as actually before GPT-3, I think, which was the main commercial one that went live, like the GPT-2 days, we were experimenting a little bit with, could we use that tech to just basically take these bits and produce a really nice natural language summary? So for us, it was an instant win, because we solved one of the biggest problems we've been trying to solve for a while by just plugging into a model these almost like extracts. As that's evolved, and obviously we went from, I guess, there's two very different types of AI, which like people talk about. There's the content creator, the ultimate content creator, which is what I think of them as, which is, basically the technology is just creating content based on inputs. So great, which naturally lends itself well to legal and documents and contracts. And then there's the progression of that into obviously the agentic AI world, which is what we then progressed from a product point of view into incorporating that. And obviously there's a bit of a blurred line between what is just generative AI versus what's, I guess, a bit more autonomous and agentic. So but to start with, we use it in our summaries. We then used it in some basic workflow. So we could take the input, which was someone describing an answer to a question, and we could configure tasks on the back of that, because it's quite short, quite brief information it had to interpret. And then, now we do everything. So we have gone to that more agentic layer where we have various different agents doing various different things in parallel to perform tasks. And that's kind of our word admin's got AI redlining, so that uses a lot of that. And we've got a generic chatbot which can interact with the repository, which is more agentic. So that's been our evolution anyway, as we've gone through. But yeah, very much AI throughout the entire product, really, different forms.
That's where I was going to go for a second. So like imagining those who are kind of, tuning in or are going to hear this at some point, we still have a huge gap in knowledge between what the buyers know and understand about AI, and then of course what the tech providers are selling, even the words that they're using. I mean, even in this conversation, I always ask, can we go back a couple of steps? Because people are embarrassed to ask, so I want to ask on their behalf. People are really overwhelmed and confused, and they're assuming there's an assumption they should know things, or there's that feeling, and I see it with them on these calls where I see the eyes, I see the concern. I'm like, and nobody's even just stopping to say, that's okay. You probably still need to remember or be reminded what is an LLM. They hear it, and I think there's a little bit of this fake FOMO-y. They're at a cocktail party, like, yeah, what LLM do you use? I don't know, what LLM do you have? What LLM do you like? And I feel like these poor buyers, and the buyers in my mind are going to be your kind of, let's imagine they're not even in a legal operations function. There are so many just practicing lawyers in-house, overwhelmed with contracts. They found their favorite red pen to edit. They found their favorite email. They use Word. They're progressing, and now they need to find their favorite what? Their favorite AI. Their favorite. They have to know the LLM model. They have to know. When you're talking to prospects, how are you guys bridging that divide, or how do you tackle really educating your buyers? Because I think there's a burden on. I'm going to say you guys. I'm going to say there's a burden on the providers to educate these buyers right now. And I'm still seeing a gap. So walk me through a little bit, how are you tackling it and educating so that people are making the right choice? You don't want the wrong buyers, right? That's just bad for you. That's bad business.
I agree. So I could give you some really maybe poor or bizarre analogies that I think about, and it might give you some weird insight into my brain. I don't know.
I love a good analogy. I've tried everything from race cars to engines to everything.
Well, let me go really wild and out there. So I kind of the way I think about it is almost like, and this is terrible. And the only reason I thought of this is my daughter was playing on the Nintendo Switch, and she was playing the Wii Sports game. So I'm going to use that analogy. So the kind of LLMs and the AI and the agentic AI to start with is the best way I think about it is the model selection is like picking a character to start with. It's like some people are faster than others. Some people are maybe slower, but maybe they're better at reasoning, and they take longer to think, so they're slightly like slower, but they're you might want to use them for a more intellectual task. Some are better at just maybe task driven rather than thinking based. Like there's all these different kind of slight variants about the type of, I guess, person. So I'm imagining like a screen on the picking like a we character depending on the characteristics and what do you want from this person. The next is like, what knowledge do they have? Because this person is designed to be essentially your assistant. You're going to ask questions and they're going to create content for you. So you want them to be a certain way when you're kind of selecting. And this is kind of how we think about it from a product point of view. The next is like, what knowledge do they have? Obviously, most LLMs off the shelf have, knowledge of the internet. They have knowledge of, if you Googled it, they probably have knowledge of it. But they don't have knowledge necessarily off the shelf of things that you might actually want them to, particularly if you're giving them a task which is a bit more complex, like understand this language. Well, it would help if you gave them knowledge of your own contracts, or if you gave them knowledge of your, like, call it a playbook, whatever it might be.
Yeah. So that's not context yet, right? I'm sure you're going to get to context in a minute, but so we're still talking about just knowledge, just education. I need to train this thing that I've brought into my my world, right?
Yes, exactly that. And you're kind of like design, and then obviously there's ones off the shelf for people using the GPT, which I'd describe as a kind of a good all-rounder for, like, whether it be speed, whether it be kind of the complexity of thinking, and also like has knowledge of the internet. So you kind of know what you're getting with that. And where it's getting interesting now is you can start to kind of, I guess, design your own. And we do this in the products, where you can start to say, actually, I want, this type of model, but I want it to have this type of knowledge plugged into it. And so when I ask it a question and I'm asking, it to generate me some content, or look at a clause and think about how it might be redrafted or whatever it might be, the context it has to be able to make that decision is a lot more relevant, and it's going to be able to do it, with reasoning, because I want that type of model. And that's on us as a product to sort of match the two together and make sure that whatever task you want it to do, whether it's interpreting what someone has said to create a task, or whether it's helping you review a contract, or whether it's creating a summary, we as a provider are basically deciding who's the best, I guess, AI in terms of whether it's good at task driven, whether it's fast, whether it's better at reasoning, and also what knowledge should we give it to be able to do that task that you want it to do. And that's what we are thinking about these, I guess, the AIs or the LMs, that when we're putting it in the products, and we're designing the product to make sure that we've got the right AI model with the right knowledge doing the right task, and we're kind of doing that throughout the product.
Right. Now, so what about this whole, the multi-platform, where this one's smarter at this thing, this one's smarter at that thing? I refuse to name names. I'm getting to a point, honestly, where I honestly think it's impossible to keep up. And I kind of challenge anybody who, comes out as an AI expert these days. I mean, there's kind of the engineering experts. I mean, there's the technical experts. They certainly have a perspective and an expertise. But I feel like once you're moving outside of that core, technical engineering expertise, everybody's just trying to keep up. I'm sorry. And the change is lightning fast. So how do we even think about and I hear it all the time, these generalizations. Well, Perplexity is great at blah, 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 Harvey, blah, blah, blah. And I don't know. I don't know if I'm skeptical, or I just feel like, it's all a little bit correct, but it's all a little bit incorrect. I mean, these statements. So, how do you all approach, like, how quickly do you have to change? And I don't know, or your underlying, and what do you use? Is it OpenAI? Is that what you're built on, or you use a little bit of everything? Is that a secret? I don't even know.
It's a good question. This is what I mean about, like, almost if you leave it to open. I think there's some that give a load of control where you can literally do this in the background and match the models, the tasks, and like it feels overly technical. Legal aren't going to have the resource or the expertise to be able to match
they
that
shouldn't.
So, and they shouldn't have to. I mean, this is the job of the product. So I think some of the products that you mentioned, or what they're good at, is predetermining, like, those things, like what model should we use for which task. If you ask me to do this, I'm going to match up these things, and it's going to do the highest ability task for you in that context. And that's the way we approach it. So we use the GPT models. We're all Microsoft house, so we don't use OpenAI as a third party. Everything's within Azure. But And we test the other models, but if I'm honest, because we're using them for very small, discrete tasks at a time and littered throughout the product, it performs really well, or the different GPT model family will perform well at different tasks. And that's kind of...
Let me pause for a second on this whole tasks thing, because I think
Yes.
that's another important note that people need to understand. Again, the buyers out there, the more discrete the task that you're assigning to whatever AI solution you're using for anything, the better it will be. And I think this leap in the dream of truly agentic on your behalf, it will search all the travel sites. It will find me the best rate for the best hotel that has all the features that I like on the dates that are best for my calendar, yada, yada, yada. It keeps going. You're like, it's just not there yet. No. Although the demos or the excitability or the articles, right, kind of makes you think it's there. And it's easy to get disappointed right now, is what I'm saying. It's super easy.
100%.
So when you think about tasks, are we talking about like in not just the contracting life cycle, like send to signature? Even that's a big task if you break it down from an agentic perspective, right? Tell me, you know, how should we think about that? Like, I feel like tasks are, nobody's talking enough about tasks and automating tasks. We're talking too much about just AI taking over entire processes. It's just not happening.
Totally agree. And I think the classic example, I mean, we talk about contracts, but reviewing a contract, like if you say, and a lot of people say, like, we've got agentic AI that reviews contracts. Like, the reality is, the way I think about it is, when you're, as a lawyer, when you review a contract, you do go through so many micro processes when you're doing a review of the contract. So the first thing is, right, I'm going to look at this piece of information and decide if it's relevant to a topic. Is this relevant to duration, or is it relevant to an indemnity? Is it something that's relevant to liability? I've got to interpret that information first. And then once I've decided that it's relevant, I then have to go and say, okay, how does this piece of text compare to what I know is good or bad? Is this should be highlighted? Should it not? Based on that, I then may do an action. I may redline, or I may add a comment, or I may create a task, whatever it might be. So, I think a lot of people are talking about this too holistically and saying, we've got agentic AI to do a pretty, a full redline of a complex contract. The reality is, I mean, if they do, it probably won't work, because one AI is not going to be able to do all that.
Right.
For us, it's all about breaking it down into these really component parts that you probably take for granted when you're doing it as a human, because it's just naturally happening.
That's right.
You've almost got to treat the computer or the AI as very discrete tasks, and break that kind of thinking down into these very, very small tasks. And that's basically what we've done. So then you can get to the stage of where people call agentic, where do you decide to give one of these little agents that you've created, imagine them running down a hallway and they've got to decide between 3 doors which one to go in. Do you want to do that and allow them 5 decisions? Or do you want to just say, run from here to there really quick and just make this one decision? After that, pass on to someone else who actually might have a different knowledge set, might be faster than you at certain things, or might be slower and take the time for just that little task. Right. And it's kind of chaining these things together to really get the maximum amount of, I guess, effect for the customer. And that's really what we focus on, because we have deep domain knowledge. I know from doing it for a number of years, exactly what's involved, and we break it down into really, really component parts. And that's how we apply AI to the product. It's not just upload a Word document to a model and say, I want you to redline this contract. That's not how we would approach the problem.
Okay. No, I love that. And I think the stitching together of the different tasks, that's where the coding comes in. That's where the custom coding comes in.
Yes.
And I think that's another thing that I'm like, okay, look, the AI part, there's really, really super smart, super deep, not super smart in terms of, I could never do it, but very detailed, nuanced prompting. That is really, when you're taking a standard LLM, a commercially available LLM, you are adding on top of it really, 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 really detailed, super, super, super long prompt. And then you have to connect that to something else, or else it just isn't enough. And it's this interesting spot right now where I'm like, if you're really careful and methodical, and you can probably write your own prompt, kind of, enough, but you won't really extract value until you stitch it with some of these other pieces. And I think that's the dynamic that buyers right now are just confused, because they're just seeing, again, magical demos, which I love to, demos better be perfect. Of course, they better be perfect. That's what they're designed for. But really knowing how to ask the questions and get under the hood is key. And I can go on forever, and we're 30 seconds to go. I'm going to let you take us and end this on 30 seconds of, what does every in-house commercial contracts lawyer need to know right now when they're out there shopping and feeling pressure to buy AI? What should they do? Where do they start?
Well, I mean, this almost feels like a shameless plug for you, but I do think that one of the most important things that people can do is, I mean, what we just talked about, breaking everything down into actually what is the problem, what you're trying to solve. Is it like, if it's a contract review, fine, what type? Is it complex? And break it down to those component parts that I mentioned. And I think if you plan that out at the start, then if I'm honest, the solution becomes obvious because you know exactly what you want to solve, and you've done the preparation on matching it to pain. You're not just going, you could take a demo of every AI tool and you try and match pain to it afterwards. But if you've really defined where the pinch points are first, like, the solution actually becomes really easy. So I want all of my sales team to create MSAs on their own from Salesforce.
Yeah.
You just discounted 95% of the market by having that as a problem statement. And so I think it's about really focusing on that.
Amen. Amen. I can't say it enough. I'm like a broken record. What's the problem you're trying to solve? I need AI. Nope. Try again. What is the problem you're trying to solve? I really need to find the best AI. I'm like, I'm done with this conversation. So yes, you are spot on. Problem you're trying to solve. That's always where we want to start. Thank you so much. We're going to end it here. We'll probably have to do another session because there's always so much to cover. Thanks so much, Tom. I really appreciate the insights. Until next time, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.